group, there is somebody posting saying, can we swap tests? Like, have anybody got an earlier test? Anybody got a later test? So I think, yeah, that will be a biggie, taking that feature away from driving instructors.
I wouldn't spoil it for all when it comes to a few bad apples. If you could run the DVSA, what solutions are coming to your mind as an experienced instructor and trainer?
Parties every Friday.
Inspire Instructor Training Podcast, where the learning never stops.
I would like to, rather than talk about Diana Digs Deeper and Phil's thoughts, is to have a conversation around the new consultation from the DVSA, all about changing the way you can book a driving test. Because I thought that would be a really exciting conversation. But I think it's important. I think partly because I think it's hugely going to affect us if we don't have a say. And we could, my concern is going to be that the DVSA makes some changes and then Facebook is going to be flooded with driving instructors going, hey, what the hell? And all of those instructors that are saying, hey, what the hell, didn't respond to the consultation. So this is kind of my shout out to respond to the consultation if you feel like you have an opinion on this. And almost, it's a bit like voting. I think you don't get to moan about the government if you didn't vote, basically. And I think the same happens with the DVSA. You don't get to moan about the changes they make if you didn't fill out the consultation. That is my theory. And at last consultation, there were, I think, 5,700 driving instructors filled it out of what, 40,000. So if we had 40,000, we don't get 40,000 listeners on our podcast, but if you had 40,000 driving instructors, that would be a far better representation of what we all actually think, and I can't see the DVSA not being able to listen to that. Whereas actually when you get 5,700, that's a certain type of instructor that answers it, and therefore I think sometimes the answers get a bit skewed compared to what the whole industry thinks. So yeah, get out. That's my first message of the podcast, is go and fill it out. I'm a little bit late to the party actually, because it's been out for a while and I filled it out today and it took me less than 5 minutes, I'd say. It's really like 3 or 4 different questions. That is it. And I filled out some of the wordy bits where it said like, give us some more information. So yeah, it really doesn't take long. So yeah, go fill it out and I'll put some links to it in the show notes.
I'm interested because I haven't yet filled it out just because I've been on holiday and stuff like that. So I'm going to do it tonight. Whilst it's fresh in my mind, actually, and I think I'll prompt you guys to do it because Phil hates filling out forms. So the fact that he's done it and is saying it's okay, that's fine. I wondered, and we'll dive into some of the options that they've put forward, but have they got any option for you to suggest alternatives?
There is you know what, half of me wants you to fill it out live on the on the
I'm up for that.
Yeah.
But then I don't want to skew at anybody else's thoughts.
No, I think we'll just go for it because the page leading up to the questions explains everything about what you need to know, and the questions are just based off that. So I think there's about 6 questions, and they're all like go from like strongly agree to strongly disagree about each statement, and then at the bottom of each statement there is a question saying, how will this affect you? And you have 150 words, so you've got probably 5 or 6 options to write 150 words on each different thing. So plenty of space to write your thoughts on how that affects you and how that which we can maybe go into how we feel like it affects us as we go through. So shall we explain a little bit about like what this is.
Yeah.
So effectively, it's the DVSA trying to change the booking system because they're hoping that that is going to, I suppose, stop misuse of the booking system. And yeah, I think that's it basically. I was going to say because behave the way people behave on the booking system has changed, but actually that would be maybe what the DVSA sees as misuse. It's not they're not stopping you, or they don't necessarily want to stop you booking and booking driving tests. What they're worried about is the amount driving tests get swapped and moved around from location to location, from pupil to pupil, and absolutely there are, and I can hear instructors listening to this going, hey, I do that. And absolutely there are people who do that, and it is perfectly valid and it's reasonable and it's for their pupils. But the issue is there are also people out there that do that for other reasons and profit from that process. And I think that's what the DVSA are trying to swap and change. I was just looking at some of the stats that I saw for here from the last consultation, the 5,000, oh, it was 5,200 instructors that filled out the last one, that 60% of them swap tests, which I thought was quite an interestingly high number. But then again, I think that's slightly skewed from the whole of instructors as general, because I feel like the sort of driving instructor that fills out a consultation is also more likely to be the sort of driving instructor that does stuff for their pupils. Um,
Oh, I don't know, you know. I don't know, you know, because actually, if you think about it, 60% of the instructors said they have used the swap feature test. That's still sort of, in theory, there should be 60% of driving instructors filling out that consultation.
I think that number would be lower with all the people that didn't. I don't think it's 60% of instructors swap
I,
tests.
I sorry to chip in here, but one of the things I think there are different levels of swapping.
Mhm.
So, for example, I absolutely have swap tests, but I don't do it to the degree that you do it. So I will
Makes me
get
sound like I've got some sort of bot.
you have, it's your wife, and she does fantastic, you know, pupil ninja actions, but all within the realms of, you know, proactive positivity on what your pupils need and what your instructors need. But I will swap tests, but mine's is more of an ad hoc basis, and I will call them up, and sometimes I do that whole gamble thing at 11 o'clock at night where I've got like three screens open and I'll try and do it, which is a challenge for me. But equally so, I'll call them up and do like the three-way swaps and the two-way swaps and stuff like that. So I do that, but I don't manage all of my pupils' tests because, quite frankly, I'd be in a darkened corner just shaking. I just wouldn't do it. It's not for me. So I think that there's levels of it, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're right. And I think even actually instructors that don't book their tests for their pupils might swap tests for their pupils.
Yeah.
So if they don't, because of the like, I know that a lot of areas have like WhatsApp groups for driving instructors who swap tests between them, and so they may not have booked their test, but they have a pupil who's got a test, so they can get those details, and that those, and this is where I think some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is an issue, because I think if you take that feature away from driving instructors, there's going to be a lot of people potentially going to test not ready because their driving instructor suddenly can't use this tool to move them to a later date. And I would say daily within our WhatsApp group, there is somebody posting saying, can we swap tests? Like, have anybody got an earlier test? Anybody got a later test? So I think, yeah, that will be a biggie, taking that feature away from driving instructors. So looking at what they're proposing,
Mhm.
so the first thing that they're proposing is who can book and manage driving tests. So option A, only the learner drivers can book and manage driving tests. So in that option, driving instructors would no longer be able to book or manage car driving tests. Instructors could still use the online booking system and manage driving tests to set dates and times when they're available and unavailable to take their pupils to driving tests. This stops learners booking them when they're not available. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, earlier when we were discussing, I was like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a massive benefit to that. However, I understand it, and I think what the DVSA are trying to do, and they're almost trying to balance fairness with integrity and results. They want to get results. They want it to be fair, and they want everybody in the system to have integrity and do everything right. The problem with this is that, as well, you currently handle your tests, so removing that could massively disrupt that sort of workflow. And I don't even fully rely on my pupil to complete a reflective log. So having them manage their own tests, even though I do, there's that communication piece there as well. So I'm not loving it. The only thing I would say as well is I wouldn't spoil it for all when it comes to a few bad apples, because I don't think it's the majority of instructors. In fact, I think it's very few instructors that are exploiting the system, but it puts a lot of burden onto the learners to do that for themselves. So I don't love that one. You?
Definitely not, because I think, and I think this is interesting as well, that when we have this chat, that we are both coming from it from a place where we do this sort of stuff for our pupils. And I think there's a lot of driving instructors out there that go, nope, it's over to you. You're responsible. You do your test. And that's absolutely fine. And this won't affect them. So whereas actually we do a lot for our pupils, we book and manage their tests for them. It allows us within the driving school to swap between instructors really easily and comfortably. It allows us to search for cancellations when maybe the people wouldn't be able to do that. So it would hugely affect what we can offer to our pupils if they took this away. However, there is an element of, I think I said this to you earlier, that if you took this element away, and obviously I think it's the swaps is the big thing that instructors can't swap. I've just noticed that Sarah said that she doesn't book them, but she does swap them.
Yeah.
And I think if you took the swaps away, it does hinder instructors' ability to go, you're not ready, but actually I've got a friend who's an instructor, they've got a test in 3 weeks' time and they want to swap over, let's do that. But the flip side of that would be is you're still not taking that pupil's test. So you would cancel that test and rebook them for, I don't know, Timbuktu time. And that would create a cancellation slot for somebody else's to fall into. And obviously, if there's more people doing that rather than swapping, I think there would be more cancellations available. Now, obviously, then you've got the issue of like the bots grabbing the cancellations, and that could be an issue. So I think there's issues with that in that sense, because the bots would maybe grab them, and so they're not going to the pupil who needed it, and they're also not going to the person who's cancelling getting chucked to the back of the queue as well. So I think that's an issue. However, it doesn't say you can't do swaps. It just means the instructor can't. So it just kind of puts the emphasis on, you can still kind of have two instructors go, I've got this pupil, and the other one goes, I've got this pupil. And you just put those pupils into contact with each other and say, swap your tests together. So I suppose in a way it would stop instructors spending hours on the phone
Mm.
swapping tests. So I don't like it. I really like the fact that the DVSA are trying to do something, which is good.
Yeah.
I feel like this is taking away a good service because some people are not using it well. But I also don't think it would absolutely crash the system. I think it would just change the way we work. And I think we would
Mhm.
have to go back to putting the onus on pupils. Um, and the ones that are more proactive would do that, and the ones that
Yeah.
aren't wouldn't. I like one of the reasons even before I had a driving school, I managed to book my pupils' tests was because I think it's easier if I'm the one moving the test, it's easier for me to have the conversation about moving the test. Is
Yeah.
what I've
No,
always
I
found.
completely understand.
There's a
Yeah.
psychological element to that, and I think that's an easier option. Anyway, should we move on to option B?
Yeah, go for it. Do you want me to read it out? So
Okay, go for it.
both learners and instructors can book, but only learners can make changes. Now, in this option, both learners and instructors can book the tests as they do now, but instructors could still use the online service to book and manage driving tests to set dates and times when they're available and unavailable. Um, but only learners could make changes to booked tests or swap tests, which, if I'm honest, I think this is actually worse. You know, because as we've discovered, that's actually the point that I use it. So, like Sarah, and forgive me, I can't see the comments by the way, so you might need to manage that. But um, I don't book my learners' tests, but I absolutely manage them because I have access to the resource that they don't. So I know, like you said, we're a member of daily WhatsApp groups, etc. And we have an insight into tests that are available. So taking that away from us, by the time you communicate that swap to the learner who's in college, who then gets round to booking it, blah blah blah, that test's gone. It's absolutely gone. I don't understand the.
Necessary for swaps because it's a test that someone else has already got for changes.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. But again, it depends on how it's communicated. So trying to navigate that, and depending on how many pupils you've got as well, you're having to rely on one bit of person to come through. It's just
I
like
think
you
also
said.
the concept of putting two learners into contact with and having to like share quite like personal details
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
somebody you don't know, like there's an element of like you're kind of doing that when you're giving it over to your instructor, like to the other instructor, but there's a trust between driving instructors there, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be weird to. I know again, I can see this being like exploited if instructors went down that route of getting pupils to swap between each other. I can see people exploiting and getting people's personal details. So yeah,
100%. And also, I suppose that they're obviously getting the bots to work in some way with these learner, details. Anyway, I'm not seeing how that helps. I'm just not seeing it.
I feel like option B is a bit of a weird in between option. Either keep it the same or go all the way, like make your mind up, basically. Like it feels like a bit.
They put it into pad out the email.
I'm just looking at the comments. We've got anyone. Do you recommend any book for the part three? I'm assuming that's like any apps maybe to book. Which no, not really for the part three. I don't think the apps tend to work for that. And for booking the part three, the best thing to do is just put it on hold. And that lets the DVSA know the demand in certain areas, and then they'll send the examiners to those areas. Some areas are worse than others because they've just not got the right amount of examiners. Chris has said, when I swap, there's no real check that I'm a bona fide instructor. Just a good point. When you get asked, because
Hmm.
actually what's quite interesting is my wife gets asked,
Hmm.
and when she says no, sometimes she then they won't do the test for book the test for her, despite the fact she says, "Oh, look, I work for the driving school. I'm doing it on behalf of the driving school."
Hmm.
Um, and if she gets a particular call center person, they won't put the test for her. and she just has to ring up again and get a better call center person, and that person lets her book it. So it'd be interesting to see if they did put some sort of kind of there's no reason why she shouldn't be allowed to book it. There is no rules
Yeah.
that it has to be the driving instructor. She has my reference number, which is what it's booked under. So yeah, it's but again, I suppose that's them stopping people who work for companies that are not driving schools.
Yes.
That's that. But then those people who are doing it will probably just say yes to that answer. Yes, I'm a driving instructor. And like Chris has said, there is no way of checking that. Maybe they should ask them some like part one questions and see how they get on.
Or maybe we look at just doing so with in terms of the online booking service, you have to be an ADI to use that. So why can't all of them be directed into that system? So I get, and here's a slight issue, I suppose, that some of the pupils that you want to swap with aren't as part of your school, as we've said, instructors swap amongst each other. But why can't that system just be better? You basically, and I really don't think it would be rocket science, says the tech phobe person. But for me, I do not mean any disrespect, because I think they're trying, and that's great. But I don't understand why the booking system, which asks for your PRN, you have to be a registered ADI, why we can't almost have a verification process that triggers an automated email to the two people that you're trying to swap with. So if you have a pupil that is yours and you say, this is currently my pupil with my school, who do you want to swap with? Is this person in your school? No. Which school or ADI are they attached to? They are attached to Phil Cowley, and this is his PRN number. Here are all the details, and that then triggers a verification email to the learners to confirm the swap. I should run the company.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a bunch of reasons why that doesn't work, but I like the concept. My main concern there would be the people on the end of the email wouldn't be necessarily available at that point.
Well, I think it should be maybe a
Maybe
bare
it's just
time frame.
yeah.
So let's use the 10-day booking window as a perfect example. So because these conversations should be had. I also, on this note, think that there should be an emergency get out of jail free card type thing. So, for example, if you can justify, just like you would do like a concert event insurance, you can almost have like I mean, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but why not? Absolutely, why not? You should get at least a get out of jail free card if for whatever reason you cannot do your test on that date for extenuating circumstances. Anything ahead of 10 working days for a normal swap based system could be triggered by that automated email. You've got 24 hours to accept it. Most instructors would have the conversation with them before the swap took place anyway. They'd all be expecting it. They've got to accept, but like a DVSA license check code. No different. Just trigger a license code check for you to swap the test. These systems are all there. It feels a little bit like one hand isn't talking to the other hand.
Yeah, I suppose when I log into any other like HMRC stuff like that I have to put I get a text onto an app or onto my text to do a verification code. Yeah, there's no reason why it couldn't be getting verified. But then there's also no reason why that for people who are using it might be able to get around that in the sense of they would have the code sent to them, that sort of kind of thing. So yeah, I think yes, there should be changes to the system, and I think they are looking into that. But again, as a government organization, the issue is time. It takes to do those sort of things. They have to kind of put it forward to go through Parliament, and it's just you can't just go, oh, those guys do a good job, let's change the system. It doesn't tend to work that way in government, unfortunately. Okay, so we just to clarify here, what we're going for keep it currently the same based on our responses to that one, I think. Um, the next one, how the test can be managed. Now, I actually have a bit more flexibility in the answers to these ones. So option A, remove the ability to swap tests or change test locations. So learners could not swap tests with anyone else, which I just think that's ridiculous. Learners could make two changes to their own test date at any and time at the same test center. Learners could not change location of the test. Learners could still cancel and rebook the test if they need a different location. Um, I I like a little bit where they're going with this, and probably like option B actually before I do it. I'm gonna put out option B here because it kind of links to option A, where learners could make two changes or swaps in total to their test, so massively reducing the amount of swaps they can do. And tests could only be moved to test centers within a certain geographical area of the original booking.
Mm.
And I actually like both of those options. I think realistically, pupils, your bog standard average pupil probably doesn't need more than two changes or swaps to their test, I would say. Now, I know there are exceptions to this. I've had exceptions to this, but those pupils, there's no reason why you can't cancel, rebook, and start that two changes process again anyway. That's what happens already with the six ones.
Yeah.
The reason why that's important rather than just letting them have six tests is that is a pain in the butt for the bots to do. So it massively limits the way that they work. However, it only slightly hinders what we do. There aren't many pupils that would find this a problem, I think. And if you are finding that a problem, you're probably booking your pupils' test too early. So there's that one I'm not too fussed about. And I love the geographical one. I think that really, I think that works. I think people are going to start talking about, because there's always exceptions and people shout about the exceptions. So like, well, what about if they're at uni and all this sort of kind of stuff? But it clearly says you can just cancel it and rebook in the new area.
Exactly.
So, and those are going to be so few and far between that the benefits of preventing people booking a test in the Highlands in Scotland to get an actual test in London massively outweigh the people who are going to be slightly affected by this. But I think I don't like the option of the first one where it's only one test center, because I think you're particularly like this doesn't hugely affect me because we have the one test center and that's what we use. You have like 3 or 4 test centers in your area, don't you?
Yeah, I've got Sophia. I have got 2 in my immediate vicinity, like literally 5 minutes. I've also got 2 in Liverpool. I've got 1 in Chester. So like I've got 4 within a 30-minute radius. I've got about 6 like within a 40-minute radius. So I've got loads, like really loads. However, it's not always beneficial, as I found out today. I've been driving around St. Helens, which, yeah, it wasn't fun. Yeah, I don't like option A just because that would massively hinder options. Even though I typically just book 1 test center, you kind of have your favorite, don't you? One of them is also only open 2 days a week, so it's neither here nor there. I really, really like option B as well. I really like the 2 changes, I think. If everyone does what they should do. And the reason I'm saying that is we have been stuck in this limbo for so long. I am guilty of being the one that books the test way ahead of them being ready because of the waitlist times. So I think we're creatures of habit. I think that that change would have to happen. But like you said, cancel it, rebook. Hopefully, then it should be an easier slot to get. Because that's what it used to be. It used to be you'd book your tests, what, 5, 6 week waiting list, something like that.
Yeah, and I think if it got back to that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So that would be not a problem. But in the current climate, with the like our area at the moment is like November time, sometime in November. So actually booking your pupils' tests when they get started is not a bad idea. And I don't think you're going to fall foul of the two changes or swaps at that point. The For me, the issue is when you're getting optimistic and you move it, but you move it back a week, thinking
Yeah.
that's going to magically do it, and then you move it back another week, and then
Yeah.
that's going to be the issue. There is always going to be. This is obviously going to limit the use. There's always going to be somebody's going to fall foul of it, that person, the worst that's going to happen to that person is they cancel the test and rebook and get back in the system.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the benefit from when last time I heard somebody from the DVSA talk about this was their top priority. It was something that they said that if they could take swaps out of the system, it would have a huge effect on stopping the bots and therefore reduce the waiting list. So I think this is why they're really pushing the whole swaps thing and the location thing, because again, a lot of those bots utilize the fact that they get onto the system somewhere else
Mm.
when the tests are released within whatever area that they're released. They can get them much quicker that way. So I think both of these things would hugely restrict people misusing it with very little inconvenience for us. Whereas I think question two, taking instructors out of the equation, has a huge effect on how we can help our pupils. Whereas this one, for me, yeah, maybe slightly hinders us, but doesn't completely tie our hands behind our back.
Yeah. And I think it also stops people from jumping around easy test centres as well, looking at the and obviously, like the Highlands in Scotland was an example you used. I think it has got one of the highest pass rates. And I know of people that have gone up there. Ironically, they will message me for advice, and I'm nowhere near that. Or alternatively, as well. Sorry, I've got a dog whistling in my ear now. Alternatively, as well, it will stop people traveling and then asking for last minute driving instructors to take them to test. I think it will hinder that type of inquiry as well. Not always, because we're creatures of last minute deadlines and all the rest of it. So I do think it will have a nice impact to that as well.
My favorite part about those inquiries are how they like to try and pretend they're from the area. So it's like, yeah, my aunt came down there on holiday once, so I really know the area well, and actually I live here. Yeah, just to try and get you to accept them.
I've not had that before. But I have had, yes, I'm test ready. It's
He has
just
quite a high pass rate in our area as well. I like to think of all the amazing instructors in our area rather than it's an easy test center.
that's right.
But I think that also means we get quite a lot of tourist instructors, basically. Got Chris has been commented as we've been going through. A couple of the things I'll sort of kind of say. He's saying people will be selling provisional license details. Yeah, okay. Family members to sort of bulk buy, which I get it, but people are always gonna find a way around the system. But for me, it's harder to do that, if that makes sense. And it's one person at a time. He says DVSA response feels like a toothpaste tube effort, which I'm not really sure what it means, but I enjoy the analogy, I just don't get it.
Toothpaste
And
bottle effort.
he has got a good point here where he's saying about a toothpaste tube effort.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like the squeezing it out slowly, like trying to, yeah, I think. Yeah.
Uh, the I'd love to sit in the back of one of Chris's lessons, just because
No.
I feel like these analogies would come out.
Which Chris is it?
Chris Francis.
Ah, yes.
And because we're all booking tests in advance, we've added around 0.5 million extra test amount. I'm not sure where he's got that number from, but I'm sure it's close,
It's on the that
which I get.
page.
And I don't think it's necessary, like, in my opinion, that's not extra demand because the demand's still there. The pupils are still like doing lessons. It's just that they've got a test booked. In the past, where we had the 5 to 6 weeks, I still had that pupil. They just didn't have their test booked, but they still took their test in November. They just didn't have it booked for 6 months. So I don't think it's necessarily increasing demand. I think it's more increasing the list looks longer, but
Yeah.
it's actually an extra. I suppose demand would show you like how many people have A, passed the theory test, or and B, taken a driving test. That shows you where the demand is.
Hmm.
But actually, again, it's one of these things. Like if you remove this problem, if you reduce the waiting list, the instructors will change their behavior, pupils will change their behavior, and they won't need to book as far ahead in advance because it won't be that far ahead in advance.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. You've hit the nail on the head. What are if you could run the DVSA, what solutions are coming to your mind as an experienced instructor and trainer?
Parties every Friday. Just
That proper tickled me.
just to kind of boost morale. So what would I change? I actually quite like the reducing the swaps, and so the location one for me I think is a big go. I really think that's useful. In the questionnaire, it actually asks you, in your opinion, like how far should the radius be? Um, like 5 miles, 20. I think I put 30 miles as my
Mm.
option. I think that's like reasonable. But then again, that's me from like a Devon point of view.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I don't know if you're in London, how many test centers that covers, or in your area as well. So I think there's I don't think it matters. I think if you're looking at 30, 40 miles, that pupil is at least relatively like close and has booked it for a reason. When
Yeah.
as long as you're stopping the booking it for miles away and then booking it to swap it, I think is the problem.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
What would I change?
Mm.
I I would increase the price of the driving test. That's my first one
Okay.
because I think it would make it more important, and I hopefully would fund. In my argument has always been fund paying the examiners more so they don't keep losing them, but you can't do that because they're part of the system, which is fine. Although again, like if people want stuff to happen, they could make that happen. Like if the government cared enough, they could make a rule. Like they're the government, they can change the laws. So they could make the rule to do that.
Yeah.
So but that would be one of the reasons. But I also think increasing the price of the test means people are less likely to just give it a go.
Yeah.
It's not going to take it away completely, but less likely makes it more important. But if nothing else, if they can't use it on examiners, maybe they can use that extra money on changing the system, and like they could employ you to come up with email ideas and stuff.
I've got more ideas. I'm just waiting for you to ask me the question.
Well, then, what are you going to change in a day?
Well, to be fair, that idea did just pop into my head, that earlier one. So I have only really been thinking about this for today. Um, I quite like the idea of a certificate, like ready to pass certificate. We've got the ready to.
Ah,
Were you going to say that?
yeah.
Oh well, that's weird. We've got the Ready to Pass campaign. Everything is set up. We've got the education pieces on that. Perhaps we mandate those instructors to sit in the back of 5 driving tests, 5, 6, whatever. And those instructors that have sat in the back, and see you're chomping at the bit to speak, so calm down. Perhaps those instructors that have, you know almost done a little mini assessment, a bit like the Pass Plus certification. If they trust us to sign off the Pass Plus, and I understand it's slightly different, but all we're doing is signing off authority for them to sit their test. I do also think, though, and I'm not saying that all pupils have to be signed off by a driving instructor. I'm just saying that if you are being represented by a driving school car, then that is something that would have to be signed off. Perhaps maybe look at a points based system where, if you show good booking behavior with your pupils, you might even get priority on the test booking systems. I don't know. I'm sort of, my wee brain's sort of firing off in sections here. But I definitely like the idea of a test ready to pass.
So just talk me through that bit again. So when this test ready, so are you saying you've got specific instructors who are trained to almost do like a pre-test?
No, not a pre-test. But yeah, I hear you. Like if they know what good, safe driving looks like, then they should be able to sign off that pupil's ability to go and book that test or sit that test.
But only certain instructors would have that.
I think almost all ADIs should have it, but you achieve that after completing a Ready to Pass campaign, I don't know, workshop or something like that.
Instructors that don't have the certificate do.
Hold on, you broke up.
Sorry, what do the instructors that don't have the certificate do?
So they fill out a Ready to Pass campaign workshop, which is all set and running. All they have to do is put that information into an assessment-based situation at the end. And then I would also suggest that they sit in a minimum of 10 driving tests.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, let's say I'm Mr. Instructor and I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done that, but I haven't done it. I don't want to do it. It's not my cup of tea doing a DVSA work thing. And no, I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying, imagine I'm that instructor. Have a pupil who needs to go to driving test. How do I get that pupil's test because I can't sign them off?
Great question. That to me is no different to setting your part 3.
You're saying it's mandatory though?
I think it should be. Yeah, I think it should
So
be.
I think because I'm leaning towards my idea is slightly different, but similar. Because I actually think that I hadn't considered the idea of having a course that you have to do, but maybe that's what will happen. So I think all instructors should sign off their pupils to go to test. And you shouldn't be allowed to take a test unless you have that signed off certificate from a driving instructor. And I didn't actually consider the fact that maybe if we're going to allow instructors to do that, that actually, yeah, there should be a mandatory course that you do, or something to say you can do that. Because my theory behind it is I think it will, although again, I think it may get misused. But it means that you're giving them your stamp of approval. And then I think it really kind of goes, one, you're going to have more pupils who are ready for test because it will stop instructors doing the whole giving it back. It will stop, which I know not a lot of instructors do, to be honest. I don't think instructors like to give it a go. But maybe those 50-50 ones, they'll lean towards, you know what, I'm not signing the sheet. But actually the big one, I think it will change. It'll stop the pupils who go, well, I've got my own car, your opinion doesn't matter. Being able to have that certificate. My only issue with it is and this is why we've been brought in, because there is no rule that says you have to have a driving instructor to take a driving test. So that's the issue, is there's no, but then that's just because that's the rule. So change the rule that somebody, it doesn't mean you have to learn from an instructor, but maybe you pay an instructor for an assessment who then signs you off. My issue though is the corruption with that.
Yeah.
That's the issue, is instructors going, give me 50 quid and I'll sign it. That sort of thing.
But I think it would have to be an ADI that has done the course. And I think there should be booking, just like they do with the standards checks in terms of the DVSA. If we're already having a trigger system for that, just tie it into the one that you've signed off ready for test anyway. If you're signing off that somebody's ready for test, it's no different to having your badge in the window saying they're ready for test.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like it. I think there's issues with it and it need ironing out. But I have long thought that we should be signing off our pupils to go to test, because one, it means we've said they're ready, and I think it makes you more accountable.
Yeah.
I think then people can't necessarily complain about the trigger system, because you've said off you go, which you've kind of done anyway by turning up. But I think a piece of paper is just a little bit more like there's a moment there that goes, yeah, you're ready. And it's quite a nice moment actually. But you had this recently with your pupil, who you had that moment of like you were doing that extra training, and it was that day of like, oh, we're going to do the test or we're not going to do the test, and you said, yeah, let's go do the test. I think you're ready. And I think, didn't your pupil say that she was more happy about that than potentially passing the test?
Yeah, she actually, so it was literally the afternoon before the test. And this is where the whole 10-day thing is really cumbersome in a lot of situations. Puts a lot of pressure on the driving instructor to try and fill in the gaps in order for them to be test ready. And I don't just mean test ready, I mean road ready after that. Yes, and what she did, it was literally the day before we'd had the conversation, look, shall we call it a day now? She was doing a semi-intensive anyway. We've got a week of lessons, or do we leave it until the very end? And yes, I did say that, because that was her option. She'd already spent a certain amount of money. I said, do you want to nip it in the bud now? And I think we said, look, let's just take all the pressure off of it. Anyway, cut a long story short, her test was on the Saturday. The Friday afternoon, I confirmed that I would be taking her to test. There was communication throughout, obviously. And when I picked her up on the test day, she went, me and my husband were jumping about the place as if I had passed the test last night when you said I was okay to go this morning. So yeah, literally as if she'd passed. So yeah, and you're right, there is that nice special moment, and you sort of prompted some ideas for me here, because I quite like the idea of getting a little card anyway, regardless of what the DVSA says. I quite like the idea of, giving the pupil a card or a certificate and saying,
So I used to do this. Yeah. So the first time I left BSM, I started a driving school called First Time Pass, and the motto of the driving school was, if you don't pass first time, we will refund your test fee, or pay for your second test. Why are you looking at me funny? That was a perfectly good slogan.
I love it. How does it work out?
Well, it was fine, because my theory was, one, I had a very good pass rate. Like I was, every year was like 80%. So one, there wasn't going to be that many refunds. And two, it wasn't a refund. It was, I'll book your next test. So
Fabulous.
what happens is, anybody that failed, yes, I'm losing like 60 quid for the test, but I'm getting 10 hours more training with that pupil, because I need to rebook. So from a money point of view, from a marketing point of view, but part of the T's and C's of that was that you could only take the test if you were signed off by your instructor. And so that was a little certificate that we did that said, you get this is my signature to say, I think you're ready, off you go, take your test. So yeah, we did used to do that, and I like that even without the deal or the concept. The concept of just going, there's a moment there.
I love that. I don't understand why you stopped doing that.
Well, I yeah went back to BSM and also then started a new driving school. Also, I didn't. I think the reason I don't do it now is I'm not test focused anymore, and I feel like that brings in people who are
Yeah,
up
I
on
hear
the
you.
driving test.
Yeah.
Whereas now I don't really talk about the driving test. Um,
It's interesting though. This has turned into a marketing podcast, but I think that's something only because you just change the narrative. The concept itself is a good one, but you change the narrative, not necessarily in terms of because people book because they want to pass their driving test. I actually really like that concept, and I think that's just an education piece. And say you do know that when
there's a warning for Terry that we're for our next support meeting.
I love it. I think it's a brilliant idea. I really think it's a brilliant idea. Uh,
I'm just going to
but
read some of the comments, if that's all right. So Kev has said that all of his pupils have said the DVSA are mad. I'm paraphrasing that, by the way, but that was the gist of his comment. Also, that instructors should sign off maneuvers and state that they're test ready, so there's no maneuvers on the test, a bit like LGB. Do I personally don't like that. I think there's I think there's too many different standards of what's okay for instructors. I think yeah, and the maneuver doesn't really take much out of the test, to be honest. So I like the concept that I don't know. If it could be I like it if it could be sort of kind of regulated properly.
mhm.
But I think the problem is Kev is looking at that from his standards of teaching pupils maneuvers. And I absolutely would trust Kev to sign off his pupils. I would not trust all 40,000 driving instructors to do that. As much
No,
as I love you
yeah, no, absolutely.
all. Chris has a pupil who has booked approximately 30 miles away, 1.2 hour drive. That's a hell of a slow drive. 30 miles through. Well, he lives near London, doesn't he? So it's like, yeah. Yeah, so I get it. It's she can't swap, and I think this is the issue that there's always going to be, and this is what you know what this is why I don't like it. Like when Loveday Rider comes on stage and people ask questions because it's always I've got a pupil who's this story, and I think the problem is we don't need we can't look at this in, and I'm not sure this is what Chris is saying to be honest, but I think we can't look at this in this pupil wouldn't fit this pupil's story, if that makes sense, and because that's not how you can't look at it. You've got to look at it in the whole country, all God knows how many tests there are across the year. You've got to look at it like what works best for everything, not those. There's always going to be the pupil that's going to fall foul of something that the DVSA change, and but if it's better for the whole system, then it's better for the whole system.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. Mm,
We wrap it up. I'm just thinking we've talked
yeah,
about the DVSA. Yeah,
yeah.
I'll let you wrap.
I I've enjoyed this actually because we don't often do this, and it's been quite interesting. I liked it. Albeit I'm slightly biased. But if you guys have any further ideas or you would like to share some insights or you want a further, conversation or, feel free to put that in the comments. And I would urge you to, whilst we're chatting about this and whilst it's fresh in your mind, go actually fill out the consultation. Phil, I'm not sure if you would be able to put the link on the socials afterwards. And just, yeah, it will only take about 10-15 minutes maximum. So we hope that this has inspired you. Thank you for tuning in. And we will look forward to seeing you next Monday, every Monday at 7 p.m. for our live Q&A. And every other Wednesday, we have our personalised Zoom sessions. Thank you for joining us, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Inspire Instructor Training Podcast, where the learning never stops.